Hey everyone, this is my new Fulgora Science Island. It's an optimization to my previous Science Islands covered in the previous video. And while it looks similar, it is a massive improvement in terms of entity use, compactness, and UPS. But it is a significantly more complex system. There's lots of wires, circuits, timers, train schedules. So in this video, I'll go through the general strategy, the layout, the high-level logic, and then we'll talk about some UPS and various design trade-offs for it later on. As a quick recap to my previous video, this is a standalone Science Island for uncommon Q2 EM science. It makes 240.9 per second, or just over a full belt. It is an endgame megabase build. It uses a minimum of 2,500 mining prod and scrap prod of 30, and with that we will send scrap through 24 recyclers in the center, and these mine directly into the cars, and then we let a runaway train basically destroy everything that is not of any value. It's a complete abuse of the train system, but it is really efficient. And on Fulgora in particular, it's really efficient, because you get to avoid the largest part of the Fulgora scrap pipeline. One train loop and the equivalent of 32 full steel chests gets deleted instantly, and because of the car's generous inserter coverage, we get to basically connect 2 recyclers and up to 6 inserters. I have less now than I used to, and ultimately we just pick out the few valuable stuff that we want. So that's a short recap. I will now go through it and note particularly places where we made significant improvements. So first of all, the bus. The car bus is now much smaller. There's only 7 cars on each lane and 2 on each outer side. And that is a significant reduction from the previous video. There used to be 43 cars in total, so we're more than half the number. And the number of car destructions is definitely worth optimizing for, because there are many costs associated with smashing of cars. Need the construction cost, obviously. Bots need to replace them. Bots are not cheap. And there are particle costs that are significant when it comes to destroying them as well. And I'll get into more of this later. But right now we're trying to focus on optimizing the value of the cars. Like as these cars fill up, we want to basically have these as full as possible, basically completely full, by the time the car will come around to destroy them. We're also because we know that the cars are generally going to be full, we're also a little smarter with how we pull things out of them. There's a tick network. You can see this green wire here connected to basically everything around the cars. That pulls every 40 ticks, so that these guys aren't constantly woken up by the car's inventory being bumped by these 2 recyclers. Some things are actually excluded from this, like these 2 here. These are overflow inserters for rocket parts. If you don't have a significant pull in rocket parts for Aquilo, for instance, then you can actually reduce 2 of these. We're being a little smarter as well with how we pull certain ingredients. We're only pulling some of them, basically as much as we need. Only 1 car focuses on ice in each quadrant, actually only 2 quadrants. Stone is only from 2 cars in the center. Metals on the side, as you can see. And then the space here has actually been increased a little. That is to give room for centralized components. This has been compensated by somewhat by moving these miners a little further down. So it should still be the same difficulty in finding a patch for this. That is to say, it's going to be somewhat difficult if you're on default patch size. But if you have bumped the patch sizes a little bit, it should be no problem at all. For the centralized parts on the bus, on the left side here we got fluids, light oil, petroleum, sulfuric. These are now shared across the entire island. And they are fluid throttled with either simple checks or latches in case of sulfuric. Sulfuric also gets its metal straight from the car bus, just recycling some gears. And then we make rocket fuel on both sides using heavy oil. Heavy oil actually comes in from the side here in the single pump. On the right side we have centralized car production. This is the star of the show, a single 8-beacon assembler that can sustain up to 84 cars per minute or 5,000 cars per hour. but with the regular tuning of the train here, we only really use around 3,000 cars per hour. So that's down more than half from the original island. For cars, we're pulling some gears and steel straight off the bus again, and then we're taking advantage of gear recycling to make this as compact as possible. On the end here, we have a single EM superconductor that is making superconductors for Promethean science. And the USB4 here, that's now only one. It takes a little bit of stray Q1 Holmium that's left over, as well as LDS that is recycled directly into it. The overflow goes into the car and then back into this recycler. You definitely don't need too much of this. It was way overscaled before. Second major change here is the use of wagon chesting. We are no longer mining into silos, but we are chaining train wagons for better scrap distribution. And in theory, this means less space platform costs, although that cost has been reduced significantly in the more recent versions of Factorio. But it is nice to avoid in theory. I'll get into that a little bit more later. Then the current nicest benefit for it is that it just allows me to do less daisy chaining. There's more space available right here, because I can put the miner kind of where the big 9x9 rectangle would be, and we get to more efficiently get daisy chain the stuff where we want it to be. Most of the stuff gets used immediately here, the Q1 scrap. There's a little bit of Q1 scrap overflowing on the left side, a little bit of Q2 scrap going up. There's less than a belt of this, it's less than a belt going here, and there's just a tiny bit of Q3 scrap. So because there's a lot of inserters that are not used all the time, you can see there's actually this red tick network here that a lot of these less active inserters are kind of piggybacking onto. It's not super precise, but it means that all of these inserters kind of do this little 3-swing and then pause for a bit, rather than to be constantly active. For all the higher quality scrap, that goes through this wagon here and then into this train cart unprocessed. Now, ideally, this is where I would end my flow explanation, but you'll notice there are also Q1 scrap inserters here, sending Q1 scrap unprocessed straight onto the line. And you can think that this gives you more Q2 scrap, so of course this seems beneficial, but it's like not the only reason that I just need more Q2 scrap. It's the main reason here is that the left side and the right side are now fundamentally unbalanced. Because the right side here is in charge of all the metals for car production. It's also in charge of ice. So as a result, this side here ends up pulling way more scrap than this side, and as a result there's more Q2 scrap available here. So we kind of want these two to be balanced, because we want them to have the same assumption up here. So otherwise we balance it for the worst one, and then this one becomes less efficient, there's more overflow, etc. So what we end up doing is that we're throwing away a little bit of Q1 scrap on both sides to kind of balance it out. There's a kind of a ratio that's been figured out by measuring how much scrap flowing through these. We basically memory cell these two things here and measure them over a large period of time. And so these are numbers that are kind of come out of that. The left Q1 scrap clock is on like 1/3 of the time, and then the right one is on 1/10 of the time, roughly. And that ends up basically balancing the Q2 scrap. And that also means that we can control the Q2 scrap. It's on the same 3-swing clock as the rest of the stuff up in this area. Of course, this is complex. If you were to try to avoid this problem, you would need to basically pull metals from both sides, put ice on both sides, need more inserters, need balancers, and you'd also lose like some direct insert benefits. So I don't think this is super worth it. And even if you did this on like this design here, it still wouldn't be balanced, because I need a good way to avoid Q3, and the only way I can really do it, thanks to rail snapping, is to have the cart extremely close here with, to get some semblance of direct insert. Ignore this janky car to make this work. And the result is I only have one beacon here, and this beacon works great for these two, but it only touches one out of these two recyclers, so I'm kind of fundamentally unbalanced either way. So yeah, I've kind of thrown in the towel on trying to calculate precisely around the base ingredients because of the nature of Fulgora and trains in general. Because with this style of island, you'll probably really struggle to have a perfectly calculable system, because you're effectively dealing with 4 different types of unusual flow control problems. Like, obviously you have the probabilistic quality mining, And then you have probabilistic scrap recycling, which gives you uneven stuff up here. And then you have train voiding, which comes at slightly at different times. And then you have a weight avoidance system that you have to kind of think about up here. So the end result is that sometimes there are more stuff flowing through your system and sometimes there's less. And this style of doing Fulgora is chaotic. The system that you see here is a careful result of a lot of trial and error and measurements. And like it's one of the many places we are taking on complexity for the sake of efficiency. So it seems to be the more efficient way to use car voiding, to have these kind of sinusoidal activity cycles. So our job then, kind of up here, becomes to take advantage of the stuff that is produced during the high period as efficiently as possible and not have to void it. So while we are talking about complexity, let's get to the most complex part of the island, the Q2 quadrants. Because as you can see, it's got circuit logic everywhere. All of the Q2 products effectively come through here, through these recyclers, and then is either shunted into the car if it's something we don't need, or it goes to the more useful silo for products we do need. And we only now have a single car, that is the trash car, and that is now targeted by only 3 inserters. But because these silos are actually offset by a single tile, we get to have this horrible inserter here, somehow targeting the car while the car is just barely touching the track. So, just car stuff. So this is technically the most expensive car to replace, as it has the longest spot travel time from the center. But the difficulty of using a single car here comes from targeting restrictions, because you now only get to use 3 stack inserters. So you have to program them quite heavily. Like there's 12 different products that flow in here, and then another 4 more unique ones from LDS, Blue Chip, and Gear Recycling. So there's big ingredient sets that these 3 needs to have, and the ingredient sets need to be overlapping as well if there's like rapid changes, because there's like this thing is pretty close to the weight restriction most of the time. And so all of this is controlled with these selector combinators around the silo. It's like it measures what we have in green from the silo and compares it to the maximum that will allow in red. And then if there's any that matches that, that's sent as the filter signal to the inserters. And so there are 3 different ones here. There's this constant combinator here that focuses, for the first inserter, focusing on concrete and steel, the heaviest stuff. And there's the other one that focuses on stone and steel. And then there's the third one here that focuses on solid fuel and ice. For the stuff we actually need, that gets sent to the last Q2 silo here. The main goal of this silo is to serve as the last stopping place before the science ingredients, and it also needs to provide the single battery cryo here with ingredients to run almost non-stop. This battery cryo is now significantly more beaconed, and there's only one of them, so that's less slack. And as I keep saying, the production rate of this island is not constant. During the tail end of the train cycle, the cars fill up, and we will start running low on Q2 materials up here. So if we are constantly producing batteries here, then we will waste the natural batteries that come out of the Q2 scrap recycling process. So in a sense, we need to actually try to limit the battery production during the early part when the cars are fresh, and then supplement with more batteries later. And this is why there is a corner recycler up here with a separate buffer chest for red, greens, and copper cables. Because this recycler operates only when this silo here is critically low, as measured by this circuit. And in this case, the recycler is able to top up on iron, copper, and green chips. And normally these come from like crushing LDS and blue chips. So we grab all these new backup ingredients from the first silo, but because we only actually need a few of them, most of them do end up in the car here. You see red chips. So to avoid like daisy chaining every single red chip and cable over in here, we do a little more checking in here to make sure that the stuff that flows into the silo doesn't already have a base level of them in here. So this is now compensated for like the total weight that this is allowed to have. Like as you can see, batteries and iron just flows constantly, but these ingredients here are checked, and there's a couple of extra things they check, not only the what we can provide, but also what we have. So as you can see there, this is a lot of complexity for a system that doesn't even need to run that often, as you can see from the number of this recycler, 48,000 versus like 1.8 million in these Q2 scrap recyclers. But it is powerful. because it allows the train to idle another 2 seconds between cycles. And the train controls basically dictates the activity of everything on the island. And in all later variants of this island that I benchmarked, this extra recycler paid for itself in terms of UPS when used moderately. And as for the battery throttling, the key strategy for this is to only top up this silo when the silo is low. Otherwise we keep the cryo stopped with batteries in its output, and that's basically done with this circuit here. We measure what's in the silo and we measure what's in the machine. So this is how we get all the useful Q2 materials. They are then sent to the science component buffer chests to make, well, first superconductors and supercapacitors. This is the chest for that. Lots of stuff in here. It's controlled by this combinator up here. It's again what we have versus what we want. It's also got Q2 Holmium coming in from the side. And there's a bunch of other combinators here scattered around as well. They're not super important. They're mostly controlling the various inserters, because these EM plants here are kind of the more heavy parts of the facility. If you don't control these inserters on such active EMs, then you have heavy wake lists and inserters gets woken up all the time. As you can see right now, there's basically no wake lists here going on. Some in other times, but basically nothing here, because this is clocked pretty heavily. And this seems to be worth it, like even if it's a separate network here per EM plant. For the accumulators, there's a little bit of a weirder strategy, because these are actually only on like 60% of the time, and we run them fully on for a big chunk and then fully off for a big chunk. And the way that's done is by using this belt here as a latch, and we read the number of it, very short belt. And we start it up when it's low and then stop it when it's near full, but crucially never when it's completely full, because the key thing is that this inserter here can always drop a full 16 size hand when there is space on the belt. If the belt ever got completely full, then that's how you get output blocked, because then you have stuff in the hand and the machine, and then you don't want to have that happening. So and then you also have the buffer chest here, which have some special logic on them, because this thing actually has a huge amount of material. Because the way these are latched, if both of them unlatch at the same time, then these guys will pull in a huge amount of materials. Like you can easily outstrip like half of the amount of batteries here in very, very quickly. You see these pull in like 130 batteries per second when they're running max. So this guy here has to work quite hard to compensate for when these guys are running full blast. So that's why there's a little extra on this inserter here, that not only is it a comparison with what we want versus what we have, there's again a comparison here to make sure that we're only pulling full hands from this silo here. So this guy is active. And of course this like 1 to 2 type setup here only really works because these guys are not on all the time. For science production itself, we now have island-wide clocks for output and input. There is a green network that stretches across the island, that is calculated from a precise ratio, the rational values of this effectively, which is the production rate when it's max beaconed. So that's tick based. And then for the input inserters, there's a signal being sent that's propagated from lead follower style, so that reads this EM here. So that means you get the nice lead follower style wake lists, but you also have some output block safety because the output is timed. Now the only complication with clocking these types of things here is that because this is not a symmetrical setup, like each of these quadrants have slightly different layouts, that means that some of these inserter swings are going to be more advantageous than other than picking up stuff from the belt. So it's actually advantageous to put the lead follower on the quadrant, or the EM in particular, that has the least advantageous pickup setup. And I'm looking particularly at this one inserter here, which needs to sometimes take like full 360-degree swings. So because we're using lead follower, that delay that this takes now propagates down to all of the other EM plants, and therefore nothing's ever blocked. Also, by the way, this is possibly a good reason not to try to rotate someone else's blueprints, because you never know what kind of assumptions are in there. But to get back to the science output, that goes into the tank as before. You get to use one less inserter, and you get to direct insert into the silos. And because everything going into it is clocked, everything going out of it is clocked. Nothing's really woken up by like the tank inventory changing. For the silo loading, there's also a simple combinator here that just checks that these 3 silos are full, and if they're not, then they will start vacating this tank. And generally that should be quick, and they shouldn't have to wait continuously, because this tank should always be filling up slowly over time, because this island produces slightly more than 240 per second, and everyone is limited to 240 on navis, so unless you've made like the wrong number of islands or something. For the remaining shared bits, there's water, which is now globally connected everywhere, so it means we can get away with doing it from only 2 chem plants. Electrolyte still is per quadrant, so there's 2 machines here. Technically, an island like this, you could be able to do it with 6 if you connected them globally and need a little more beaconing. You can even do it with 5 if you did extreme beaconing. But I did try this, and it didn't actually make any difference to me. So it's also like these machines are already kind of self-throttled anyway. Like there's a self-limit here on that. Holmium, on the other hand, is on a big shared network. They're a little overscaled for the general case, but I want to be able to grab all of the Holmium if there is more in the system, which I'll get back to. Because with all the optimizations we've done now up in Q2 with like the corner recycler and stuff, we're generally good on Q2 with the way the train is running. The thing that actually limits the island now is Q1 Holmium. So it's advantageous to me at this point to just use all the Q1 scrap for Holmium, because the Q2 side is already good. Some people were confused in the last video about why we throw away most of the Q1 stuff rather than to make Q1 science with it, for instance. So I just like to make it clear that we are not throwing away Q1. The Holmium from Q1 is used to make Q2 science because fluids have no quality, and this is completely quality-less fluids that go in here. So Fulgora is kind of perfect for higher quality sciences in many ways, because you get to use the rarest component of the scrap equation, Holmium, from the most common byproduct of quality mining, Q1 scrap. So effectively you get 4 times more Holmium than you should with this setup. But you do also lose a large part of that benefit, because you also have to upcycle Holmium plates. And as it stands, this island now consumes the required 3000 Holmium per second for science and electrolyte alone, but it also consumes an additional 4500 per second for Holmium plate upcycling. So like, if you can find a better way to upcycle plates, and I mean better in terms of UPS, then you can probably avoid running quite so many Q1 recyclers here, because that's mostly what we're using this for. And instead you can just dump a large part of Q1 scrap right onto the rails. So let's look at the upcycling strategy. There are still 3 foundries per quadrant. 2 of them are running at 40 per second, and 1 now running at 30 per second. So we've slightly increased the quality percent to conserve some fluid. We also reprocess the Q1 Holmium in the chance of getting more Q2, so it all round trips through this new car here. There's actually a tick network associated with here, so every 90 ticks something comes back out of this car, either onto the belt if it was a success, or reprocess into one of these for reprocessing, or if it's Q3 or above, it gets sent in here for destruction. So the overall strategy hasn't changed, it's just a new car, and the speed modules on the foundries still mean we are being a little wasteful in the fluid, but it is to save on entities. Quality foundries in particular have pretty bad wake lists, as you can see, so I don't want to have more of them than necessary. There are also 2 export chests here. There's one for Q1 Holmium and there's one for Q2 Holmium. They are not always in use, because the island basically barely meets the science requirements for Q2 Holmium now. And there's almost nothing left for exports by default. So if you want to use this island and have a separate export island for Holmium, then you can. Or if you don't use Q2 Cryo, that also makes sense. But I do have a chest here for exports, because I want to use it. And the reason I have this, even though I have no excess, is because you can effectively run this island in 2 modes of operation, and only one of them gives you excess Holmium. This circuit here decides whether or not we are allowed to take Holmium to insert into the chest. And that basically checks two things: whether we have excess fluid, that's like, this is a control signal measured if there's more than 17,000 in one of the tanks, that's averaged across all the tanks. And then also the belt here needs to be sufficiently full. So that's the belt here that's just measured to this point here. So it's an opportunistic system effectively, and that begs the question, what provides the opportunity? We finally need to talk about the train. The train, ironically, is the lifeblood of this island. Both megabasers and urbanists rejoice at the destruction of cars, because as the new cars are destroyed, the scrap can flow once again into new sacrificial cars, I guess. The urbanism analog breaks down a little bit here. But you don't actually have to destroy cars anymore, not all the time, because you can stop the train and the system will hibernate. Nothing gets produced, basically zero users. And you can hit this combinator here to do that, but there's also a system to automate it, which I'm quite happy with. Basically, we are reading the science request from space, and once there's no longer a science request, we start a counter, and if that counter has reached 15 minutes, and there's also no export shortages, measured here, what we have versus what we want, then we shut down the island. So this is great if you are doing mining prod, for instance. On the flip side, you can also speed up the train and you will get more Holmium, because the cars in the middle are now waiting less. So the train has two modes. There's the regular service, as indicated by this icon, and the rapid service, indicated by this signal. And the regular service only gives you enough Q2 Holmium for science, whereas the rapid service gives you a bonus 625 Q2 plates per minute per island. And this is more than you need for equal parts Aquilo science. I think I'm pulling 900 per minute for 4 islands in total. So most of the time, well, I can check. Regular, rapid, regular. So there's most of the time 1 or 2 will kick in, and that's it. And when I say kicks in, it's actually indeed automatic, because it looks at the buffers we have, and if those are low enough that we can provide like a rocket launch, then we will kick this in. You can also override this. If you hit this one here, you will make rapid permanent. If you hit this one here, then you will disable the automatic engaging of it. So it basically makes you stay in regular permanently. And that also means you can completely do exports elsewhere. Whichever mode you're in is being shown on this display panel here. And whether or not you're active is shown in this display panel here. Both of those are visible, as I showed on the map. So you can kind of see what they're in. And the schedules themselves are hard-coded into the train. Let's get on this second. Basically, we have an 8-second wait for the regular service, and then we have a 5-second wait for the rapid service. So that brings me to the end here, where we're going to talk about UBS. You're seeing it live now here in my megabase, where I'm doing constant Promethean research, and I might gain another half an ms per frame, sometimes dips down into the 7s now, which hasn't happened before. But this is a very crude measurement, so this time I do actually have a little bit more interesting thing to show, because I have some comparisons using benchmarks from the Belt CLI tool. And so this is now comparing my publicly available islands. It's the V3, which I made a video on last, which has 43 cars in total, fairly fast train cycle. V4, which has gone down to 32 cars, but with an even faster train cycle. And then this one here, which has only 18 cars and the slowest train cycle. So doing massively better. As you can see, this is just comparing these islands, 34% better than V3, and this is a comparison without mods. We can also break down these numbers a little bit, and I think that's going to be the more interesting part here. What I really like seeing these graphs here is that you can see how sinusoidal the activities of the islands are. You have these big valleys when the trains are idling and the cars start filling up, and then you got these spikes in activity when the train comes and brings everything back to life again. And then these graphs here are comparing V5 on the top to V3 on the bottom. V3 here, note that the axes are higher because the usage in general on V3 is higher. Note particularly the entity update in blue on both ones, from 0.84 to 0.61 is like more than 20% reduction. And this makes sense. I spent a lot of time optimizing away the pokiest wake lists around these areas here. I think you will find it more interesting if I actually turn on the older. This is a V4 island, and this has a lot of poking everywhere. So all of these guys are activated all the time. And whereas if I go now and look at this island, like all the stuff around science, most of the stuff around the silo is gone. Then there are the train costs, which you see here in deep purple. It's gone from 0.06 to 0.04. You know, it's a couple of percent there. But that's not as big of a cost on trains as you expect, because, you know, these are mostly locomotives. So it's not that much things that are going to show up under there. But also, the biggest cost here that are associated with trains are actually incidental costs. And those are the red bars here, because those are particle updates. And you can see those were massive on the old island when we were crashing a lot of cars, and now it's much less. Effectively, you'll see some scattering of particles around the cars themselves, and then there'll be like this big sinking black puddle of all the cars. That is what these things are for. Now, there is actually a thing you can do to reduce that, and I think that's basically a free optimization, and it's in the form of these two mods here. I consider these basically graphic options. Disable vehicle particles is a mod made by my collaborator MRX last week. You can inspect it on GitHub if you don't trust it. It's like 30 lines of blue, and it turns off various vehicle related particles. So when you actually see something that crosses over my train now, I don't see anything. I would, before the train would actually micro stutter a little over there. It wasn't something I even noticed before, but you do notice it when it's gone. So this mod here actually makes almost the entirety of this red bar here go away. In fact, this is V5 with the mod on. So you can see it's all gone here, and it's not fully gone here. And that is because this is a test over 180 seconds, which is like a complete day-night cycle. And like all of the particles that comes from Fulgora night, I think that's what this is, because this aligns perfectly with Fulgora night cycle. And finally, here is a comparison of V3 and V5 with and without particles, just the raw UPS difference. And like you can see, the first island has a much bigger relative jump by turning this off, which makes sense from the previous graph too, that was like a lot more red. And the other one doesn't have quite as much, but it's still like a very sizable one. And like from what I was using before with the particles off, and what I'm using now with the particles turned off, then like it's almost 43% improvement, which is, you know, massive. So check out the mods, they are linked in the doobly-doo below. Now, I also did a test against other publicly known islands that at least the ones I understand how to run. So don't read too much into these. Most of the islands that I'm testing here kind of predates a lot of what we know about UPS optimization today. I just kind of wanted to know roughly how they compared, because I don't see a lot of other people that are making highly optimized stuff on Fulgora, at least yet. So what I've compared is 8 of these islands to 21 of Hobbit islands, because I started out with a large number of those, 3 of Abux islands, and 3/4 of MRX's Monster Island, which is like the absolutely massive one. And these roughly all produce the same amount of Q2 Science, basically 16 the full belts of Q1 equivalent, or 8 full belts of Q2. And you know, this is already going to be a little unfair, because like Abux and MRX produce more than that, 119k, not 115. And I'm also using the aforementioned UPS mods in the benchmark, so you know, a grain of salt. This, but the line here that you see in blue is basically where I think the island concept kind of started with Hobbit's islands, and I think this is really satisfying to me. That from this starting point to where I am now, I've basically doubled the effective UPS of, or reduced the performance hit on Fulgora by half, before even talking about the transport costs involved in transporting science and then transporting science on navis with bots, which I've talked about before on like the implications of that with a megabase hub. So yeah, you read into this what you want, but I think it's clearly train voiding does really well under the right circumstances. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what people come up with. At very least, I'd be very interested to see what happens in the Fulgora UPS competition down the line. Also, one more caveat on Silochesting. Like in my real base, before removing the silos, my space platform update costs were around 0.7 ms per frame with my old islands, and then I put these new ones in, or at least when I started using this wagon style, they were still 0.7 ms after. I also checked before and after that one Factorio update that was meant to affect this, and that also made zero difference for me. So like as a result, it's not something I am explicitly benchmarking for in this island because it feels overblown to me. But you know, this might be because of I don't have that many things actually over Fulgora. Like I have maybe one Promethean ship that is waiting over there to exchange the bathroom key. Maybe have one doing exports, and there's generally a ship doing science exports. But, you know, as a counterpoint, I also have tons of ships over navis, and I also used to do a ton of Silochesting there, and after having killed that, that also made zero difference. So, like, I don't know if the synthetic tests for this end up being misleading or not, but, like, I'm not seeing a real noticeable difference in my actual base. So, I don't know, I'm not benchmarking for it at the moment, but your mileage may vary on this one. But yeah, I avoided Silochesting, and all I got was this jank-ass asymmetrical wagon build. That said, if you are interested in a jank-ass wagon island, then the blueprint is in the description, which is going to be this island here. It's a 3-stage blueprint. One is just for the crosshairs before, figure out an appropriate location for the thing. The other parts of it, basically there's a weird insertion order here. So this is everything else that doesn't have an explicit insertion order. You'll notice in particular that we've removed the beacons here so that the inserter does not get confused. Like the beacon needs to be down after the inserter, because then the inserter properly targets the vehicle. And so there's analogs of this everywhere. Like this car here needs to be targeted by all of these inserters before this rail is down. Otherwise these inserters will think, oh yeah, I am meant for a train, which it's not. There's no wagons anywhere passing through here. There's actually a car here. Actually, I can show that as well. This car here, if this car goes down before this assembler, then this inserter here will try to put all its solid fuel straight into the car, so also not helpful. So yeah, these are basically the main considerations for why they're broken up like this. There's also one final practical consideration, and that's so these these 2 inserters here, it's basically what starts the Q2 quadrant, so they are also taken out of stage 2. And that is important, because if any Q2 scrap start flowing while you're building the island, then these EM plants here might not have full beaconing. And if they don't have full beaconing, then the insertion limits are going to be wrong. And that means that these can actually get output blocked, because these have like very specifically going for full hand swings. That's what I optimized for. So yeah, that happened all the time before I started. Yeah, don't start the island until it's ready. So it's actually a bit of a pain to make this blueprint, because every time I do a big snapshot, I have to go in and like delete the 20 different components from there. So, but yeah, it is what it is. So anyway, this has been fun. Please play around with this if you're interested. If you have improvement suggestions, I'd love to hear them. And also, please don't think that I'm saying that this is the only way to do Fulgora or anything like that, just because it happens to be benchmarking positively right now. This is a design exploring a tiny search space in a giant multidimensional optimization problem. And like, because there are so many variables to Fulgora, even if you constrict yourself to train voiding alone, in that case, like what island size you're doing, what car strategy you're doing, how many recyclers, how are you doing Q2 with like buffering, how much to salvage and how much to lean on abundance, how do you upcycle Q2 plates, and is it worth saving some Holmium fluid for Q3 science, if that's if Holmium's the rarest thing. Like maybe you could take some of the Q3 stuff that naturally occurs and make some mixed quality. Like the problem just feels too big for one person alone to solve. So I'm just kind of info dumping what I have at this point. So at the end here, I would just like to thank fellow Megabaser MRX8024 for helping with beta testing, optimization, and benchmarking, as well as obviously making the UPS mods. I would not have the numbers we see here without him. So sincerely, thank you. But this is it. My name is Klux. Take care.